I'm going to read The Prince and the Pauper, Chapter 6, Tom's got instructions. There you go. Tom receives instructions. Tom was conducted to the principal apartment of another suit and made to sit down a thing which he was loath to do, since there were elderly men and men of high degree about him. He begged them to be seated also, but they only bowed their thing or murmured them and remained standing. He would have insisted, but his uncle and Earl of Hertford whispered in his ear, "Pity, insist not, my lord. It's not meet. They sit in the presence." The Lord St. John would understand, after making obeisance to Tom, he said, "I come up the king's errands concerning some matter which requires privacy. Would it please your royal highness to dismiss all that attend you here, say my lord, the Earl of Hertford?" Observing that Tom did not seem to know how to proceed, Hertford whispered him to make a sign with his hand and not trouble himself to speak, unless he chose. When the waiting gentleman had retired, Lord St. John said, "As Majesty commandeth, that for due and weighty reasons of state, the Prince Christ shall hide his infirmity in all ways, a view within his power, till it be past and he be as he was before. To wit, that he shall deny to none that he is a true prince and heir to England greatness, that he shall uphold his princely dignity and shall receive without word or sign or protest that deliverance and observance to which unto it to appertain right and ancient usage, that he shall cease to speak to any of a lowly birth and life his malady hath is conjured out of the unwholesome imaginings of our fancy, that he shows strived with diligence to bring unto his memory again those faces which he was wont to know, and where he the first he shall how his feast neither betraying by semblance of surprise, or other sign that he hath forgot on the reference occasions of state, whensoever any matter shall perplex him as to the thing he should do, or the utterance that he should make, that he shall show note unless to the curious that looks on. I take advice in that matter of the Lord Hertford, or of my humble servant, which I commanded of the king to be affirmed this service and closed at a whole, till this commandment be dissolved. Thus saith the King's Majesty, who said, "Greeting to your royal highness, and pray and that God will of his masters quickly in you and have you now and ever in his holy keeping." The Lord St. John made reverence and stood aside. Tom replied resignedly, "The king hath said it. None man's fault with is the king's command. How defeated his is, where those trappers with the depths evasion, the king shall be obeyed." Lord Hertford said, touching the king's the majesty of the emergencies concern, looks and such like serious matters it makes the parallel adventures to please your highness to ease your time with light to some entertainment. Last years go wearied to the banquet and suffer harm thereby. Tom's face showed inquiring surprise and blushes followed as when he saw Lord St. John's eyes bent sorrowfully upon him, as the lordship said, "The memory is still wrong thee, and thou hast shown some surprise, but separate not to trouble thee, and for this matter will not abide is but deferred with the pen-mending melodies to my lord of the Hertford, and speaketh of the city's banquet which the king's majesty promised some 2 months from that your highness should attend, and also liquors now." It grieved me to compensate how indeed it kept me, said Holmes in a hesitating voice, and blushed again. At this moment, Lady Elizabeth and Lady Jane Grey were announced. The two lords exchanged a significant glance, and Hartford stepped quickly toward the door. As the young girls passed him, she said in a low voice, "The frail ladies seem not to observe his humors." No show surprised when his memory stores the lives it was grieved you to note how he daughter sticks at every trifle. Meantime, Lord St. John was saying in Tom's ear, "Please you, sirs, that keep diligently in mind His Majesty's desires and remember that all those that can seem to remember or else. Let them not perceive that those are much changed from the want, those noised and knows tender how tenderly or play fellows and bear tree in their heart and how first to grip them are willing, sir, that I remain and fine uncle." Tom signified assent with his digestion and murmured the word, for he was already learning in his simple heart was reserved to a king. Acute, observed as best he might according to the king's command. In spite of every precaution, the conversation among the young people became a little embarrassing at times. More than once, in truth, Tom was near to breaking down and confessing himself unequal to his tremendous part about the fact of the Princess Elizabeth saved him, or a word from one or the other of the vigilant lord, and throwing an apparently by chance had the same happy effect. Once, the little lady, Jane turned to Tom, dismayed him with his discretion. "I pay the duty to the Queen's Majesty today, my lord." Tom hesitated, looked distressed, and was about to stammer out something at hazard, when Lord St. John took the word, and answered for him with the easy grace of the courtiers accustomed to encounter delicate difficulty and to be ready for them. "Yes, indeed, madam," she did gravely thought him, as touching his mother's condition, "is it not so, sir, your highness?" A marvel, something that stood for a second, but felt that he was getting upon dangerous ground somewhat. Later it was mentioned that Tom was to study no more at present, whereupon her little ladyship exclaimed, "The pity, the pity." That was the questioning bravest, but by the times in patience it will not be prolonged. Though it'll be scratched with the long like the father and makes the tongues master of as many languages as is good. My friends, my father, cried Tom, of disgust for a moment. "I truly cannot speak this own so that any but swine that cannot synthetized matters its meanings, and as for learning of a sort of servant. You look up, encounter some warnings in my Lord St. John's eyes." He stopped, blushed, then continued low and sadly, "How, my malice persecutes me again. My mind wandereth. I meant the king's grace no irrelevance." "You know, sir," said the Princess Elizabeth, taking her brother's hand between her two palms, respectable but caressingest, "so love deserve add to that. The fault is none of thine, but the distempers." "Thou gentle from father, sweet lady," said Tom, gracefully, "and my heart moved me to think this friend I made so bold." Once the giddy little Lady Jane fired a simple Greek phrase at Tom. The Princess Elizabeth, the quick eyes saw by the serenest brightness of the target from the shaft was overshot. "So," she tranquilly delivered, returns the volley of sounding Greek on Tom's behalf, and straightway changed the talk to other matters. The time were pleasantries and likewise the smoothly, and the whole snake and sandbars grew less and less frequent, and Tom grew more and more at his ease, seeing that all were so lovely bent upon helping him and overlooking his mistakes. When he came out, the little ladies were to accompany him to the Lord Mayor's banquet in the evening. His heart gave a bound of relief and delight, for he felt he should not be friendless now among the multitude of strangers, whereas on our list the idea of theirs going with him would have been an insupportable terror to him. Tom's guardian angels, the two lords, had at last conferred in an interview that the other parties to it. They felt much as if they were piloting a great ship through the dangerous channel they were on. The alert concentrated and found their stoppage in Charles' Bay. Therefore, asked them, and the ladies speeded were trying and drawing too close, and the lords reportedly announced they not only felt there's the charge it had been sufficient to tax the pleasant, but also that they themselves were not in the best condition to take their ship back and make their anxious voyage all over again. So they respectively advised them to excuse himself, to which he was very glad to do, although the slight shadow of disappointment might have been observed upon my Lady Jane's face when she heard a splendid striping denied admittance. There was a pause now, a sort of waiting silence, which Tom could not understand. He glanced at the Lord had burst and who gave him a sign, but he failed to understand us also. Now Lady Elizabeth came to the rescue with her usual easy grace. She made a reverence, said, "Have we leave for the Princess Grace in my breast to go?" Tom said, "Indeed, your ladyship can have the whatsoever of me and that will, for the asking, yet would I rather to give him any other thing that in my first power is, than to take the light the blessing of there's the President's hands. Period, good on, and God be with it." And then he smiled and was listed at the thought this was the full note. I have the worst thought among princes in my leading, that my tongue is some slight trick of theirs the boy's gracious speech without. And illustrious maidens were gone, and Tom turns the wheel to his keeper and said, "May it please your lordship and grant me to leave to go into the stone corner and bless me." Lord Hathor said, "So please your highness, it is for you to command. It is for us to await, that those should rest indeed. And it pushing since those must journey to the city presently." He touched the bell, and the page appeared, who was ordered to desire the presence of Sir William Herbert. This gentleman came straightway, and conducted Tom an inner platform on Tom's first movement. There was to reach for a cup of water, but a silk of velvet, so Victor seized it, dropped itself on a knee, and offered it to him, and its golden slaver. Next, the hired captive sat down, and was going to take off his skins, timidly asking leave with his eyes, but another silk and velvet his comforters went down upon the knees. To the office for him, he made it to three at a further effort to help himself, but being promptly postponed each time, he finally gave up, with a sign of resignation, and murmured, "Be sure me, I marvel they do not require to breathe for me also." Slivered and wrapped in something to love, he laid himself down and lost to rest, but not to sleep, for his head was too full of thought, and the room too full of people. He could not dismiss the former, so they stayed, as they did not know enough to dismiss the latter. So they stayed also, to his vast regret and theirs. Tom's departure had left his two noble guardians alone. They mused a while, and with this much head-shaking and working before them, to Lord St. John said, "Franny, what dost thou think? Franny, then this the king is the nearest end, as my nephew is mad, was mount the throne, and man remains the God protect England, since surely it. Really, it's a promise, so indeed, but have you no misgivings that too?" The speaker hesitated and finally stopped, and he evidently felt that he was up on the ground. Lord Hartfield stopped, and before him looked into his face with a clear, frank eye, and said, "Speak on there, but not just hearest about me. I'm misgiving as to what?" "I'm full, lost the word, the scene that is in my mind, and so near to him in blood, my lord, but craving pardon if I do offend, And as strange the managed could do so and change his throat and managed not but that his throat and speech is the princely steers but that and they differ. In one, unweighty, trifle, or another is the from what is customs was done for times and things is not strange the man is sure is the first, but from the memory it was very learnment. Because some of the best and his tears from such as about him. Loving him, his Latin speak him of Greek and French. My lord, may not offend, is but easy my mind, for this quite and receives my grateful thanks. It haunts me, understanding he was not a princess. So, this my lord, the daughter's treason, hasn't forgot the king's command. Remember, I'm part to the crimes if I about listen. St. John paid, and I hastened to say, I was in fault, I do confess it. Betray me not, just grant me disgrace out of the carcass. And I always neither think nor speak of the thing more, deal hardly with me, sir, else am alone. I'm content, my lord, so those open, not against the hear or in ears of others, and each whole bad daughter hasn't spoken, but didn't not having misgivings that he's my sister's son, and of his voice is praised his promised family to me, promised the cradle. Madden's can do all the old completing thing, no ceased in him and Morrison. Thus, like how that the old baron's malice being maddest forgot the favor of his own countenance he had known for 6 years, how it was another's name, even claimed he was the son of the Mary Magdalene. And this hat was made of Spanish glass then. So to say, and he suffered not to touch it, lest by mischance the sum Idris had might shivers it. Give this misgives is Manchester good, my lord. This is the very first I know him well, and soon with thee, king. He may adventure this to bear this in mind, and more the worst upon it than the other. After some further talk, in which the Lord St. Johnston covered up his mistakes as well as he could by the fittest protest, his face was thoroughly ground now, and could not be assailed by doubts again. The Lord hath brought a little bit fellow keeper, and sat down to keep watch, and were owned that he was soon deep in meditation, and evidently the longer he sought, the more he was bothered. By and by he began to praise the floor and mutter, thus he must be the prince, will, and he all the land maintains there can be two, and not of one's bird and birds, marvelous twine, and even or sorry, the rooster, yeah, the strangest miracle that chance should cast one in other place. Now it's just folly. Presently he said, now, and were he impostor and called himself the princely Q, that would be naturous, that would be reasonable to believe the everyone impostors yet who being called prince by the king, prince by the court, prince by all them denied his dignity, pleaded against this exaltation. No, by the soul of Saint Sweden, no, this is the true prince gone mad. I finished reading. Tom receive what? Tom receives the instructions. Yeah.